Hello YouTube, this is Alexis, and today I'm going to be doing a blast from the past. I want to thank Low Tier for Life for allowing me this opportunity to do this, and I'm going to be doing Venoms, a small archetype released back in the GX era that was used by, I believe his name was Professor Viper. Don't quote me on that. I'm not really a big fan of the anime, so I might be wrong on the name. So their entire existence is basically just a perceives of plot armor. At least that's what I like to think, because they have this really ridiculous card that if it came out in literally any other archetype, I think it would have been insanely powerful, but it came out in Venom, so we ended up with this cluster of a deck. Anyways, let's actually get on with the deck itself, and I'm actually going to be starting with the spell card, Venom Swamp, as without this card, the deck basically has no leg to stand on. Or would that be body? Tail? Whatever you would call the body of a snake, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, so Venom Swamp is the heart and soul of the deck in every meaning of the word, as without Venom Swamp, the deck doesn't have any way to actually perform any of its plays. You know, if you count stalling your opponent for days of plays, but still. As when you have Venom Swamp on the field, your Venom counters, which are sprued out by these Venom Monsters here, several of the trap cards, and one of the spell cards. Your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense points for each of them. And you might be asking, well, that's not that good. It doesn't destroy anything. It doesn't let you go plus, and it doesn't let you do basically anything. And you'd kind of be right on that. I mean, it came out in the GX era, and I mean, look at old heroes. They were just a bunch of fusion monsters that needed very specific fusion materials. Destiny heroes kind of were just a deck that tried to revolve around something. I'm sure they had a theme somewhere, but it definitely wasn't winning. Whatever. And my point is, archetypes in the GX era didn't really have a defensial win condition all the time. Sometimes they were just a bunch of cards with a similar theme going on and not really a whole lot else. Like, for example, Amazonas with just a bunch of battle-related effects and stuff like that. But the good news about this one here is that it does let you destroy the monster should its attack point become 0 by this effect, which is pretty nice. The only issue here is that 1, monsters in 2017 float, and 2, there are a select few monsters that can't be destroyed by Venom Swamp, and if you happen to protect it before it would be destroyed by something like the Phantom Knight of, let me quickly look up the card. I can't remember the name of the card. Phantom Knight's Wing. The monster will stay on the field indefinitely because its attack points didn't hit. Because Venom Swamp only triggers once, Phantom Knight's Wing would actually protect the monster. Actually, I don't think this might have been the best idea because it does give you 500 attack points and you just blow up on the next turn. But I think I made my point on that. So now that you understand the main card that you need to make this entire deck work, let's go ahead and get on with the monsters, starting with Venom Snake. One moment. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to go and get something for my mom. So let's go ahead and get back to the showcase here. We have Venom Snake, which is regrettably your strongest normal summon, but its effect is also a little bit weaker than the rest of your monsters, and I'll quickly go over why. First off, this card is a level 3 monster, which means you can't go into your ever so wonderful rank 4 toolbox. I don't know why this thing is stronger than Venom Serpent, but we'll get onto that in a moment. Additionally, if you activate its effect to place a Venom counter onto a monster, it cannot attack on that turn, which is actually a really big hindrance because this is your strongest turn 1 normal summon. And trust me when I say this, Venoms tend to lose their monsters fairly often, which means you may have to normal summon this thing and then use its effect to get a monster down weaker than it, but you won't be able to attack, which means your opponent can just put him into defense mode or use them for a synchro or Xyz summon or a fusion summon. And it's just all around a really bad card, but you still kind of have to run it just because there's very few Venom monsters, as you can see here. So yeah, level 3 reptile with the weakest effect within the archetype. Not really a lot to say there. Next we have Venom Serpent, which is arguably your best monster in your main deck that isn't a high-level monster. First off, it could actually use its Venom counter effect and still attack, which means that if your opponent has 1400 or less attack points, this thing can run it over provided that you have Venom Swamp, which is nice, I guess, but it's... why couldn't they have these stat lines be swapped? Then this would have been amazing, because then you would be having a 1200 attacker that can run over anything up to 1700. I mean, if you run over 1700, it dies, but still. Also, interestingly, Venom Serpent is actually a dark monster as well, which means that you can use Allure of Darkness if you wanted to. I mean, I personally don't like using Allure of Darkness, because when you banish your Venom Serpent, you're kinda out like your best monster that you can just normal summon right away. So yeah, it's a level 4 monster. You can use it for Castell, King of the Feral Imps. It's a dark monster, and it can attack while it weakens a monster on the field. That's pretty nice. It does kind of work out because Venom's are a rather slow deck that revolve around a lot of stall cards, like, you know, Swords of Revealing Light, Stumbling, Vengeful Bog Spirit, and stuff like that. So it's actually not uncommon for Venom Serpent to run over something in battle. Next we have the Venom Boa. So this is a tribute monster with an absolutely horrendous stat line here. 1600 over 1200 is not good, even by the era that this card was released in back in GX. One moment. Okay, back to what I was saying. So 1600 attack for 1200 defense is it's only vaguely stronger than the Venom Serpent and the Venom Snake. So let's see what this thing does to try to makes it a valid tribute summon. First off, you can place 2 Venom counters onto a monster your opponent controls, which is really, really good. That means you get to weaken a monster by 1000 attack points, but it can't attack on the turn you activate this effect. Well, I don't know why Konami thought you had to put this extra restriction on these Venom monsters. Like, I mean, let's be serious here. Venoms are not really that overpowered that they need to be able to not attack on the turn they activate these effects. Like, would be running over like a Summoned Skull or a Dark Magician, really, was that really so meta-relevant back then that you needed to make a really, really crappy tribute monster not be able to attack on a turn it uses its effect? I mean, a Monarch, sure, but this is a Venom Boa. I don't know, like, I would recommend that you only run like 1 of this if you're going to run it. If not, run 0 and just use Venom Demise and call it a day. Next we have Venom Naga, the King of the Poisonous Snakes. So this is where we get into the really good card of the archetype. So Venom Naga has the ability to special summon itself should it die in battle, which doesn't normally ever happen because it gets 500 attack points times the number of reptiles in your graveyard. But normally this thing comes out at like 2,000-3,000 attack points. I've even had a few cases where it's come out at 4,000. So this thing is not being run over in battle most of the time, unless your opponent has Utopia the Lightning, in which case it's not going to get special summoned anyway. Also, the interesting thing here is that it has 0 attack points, which is really good because it lets you get summoned. It lets it summon itself off of damage equals reptile, which is a card that you should definitely be running in Venoms because your Venoms are gonna get run over, and they're gonna get run over a lot. But if your Venoms do get run over, you get to summon out a Poisonous King of Snakes, which minimal comes out at 500 if summoned off of your damage equals reptile, so that is pretty decent because it can eat up 2 attacks. And then after that, we have the Venom Naga, the goddess of the poisonous snakes. So this card is the original Clipboard Towers. It cannot be affected by any card effects, whether they be spell, traps, or monster effects. If it dies, it gets to special summon itself back by banishing a reptile. And on top of that, it actually has a built-in win condition here, where if you manage to deal damage 3 times, you win the duel. The only issue with that is that this thing, if you're building a deck that's actually designed to summon her, She normally comes out at around like 4,000 to 5,000 attack points, and your opponent really should not be winning a duel if you summon out a monster with that much attack power. Also, I want to point out that in the anime, it just had to deal damage once, and then you just won in 3 turns. Let me quickly see if I can find it. Here it is. Yeah, it says right here. During your 3rd end phase, after this card inflicts battle damage, you win the duel. Which is actually pretty insane. You just have to go ahead and run over literally anything. And then you just simply sit back and wait on your almost indestructible monster, and you should be winning the duel under most circumstances. But sadly, in real life, you have to deal damage 3 times, which means that you normally just win the duel by, beating your opponent over the head with a big beat stick. Still a pretty good monster. I just wish it was easier to summon because you can only summon it with Rise of the Snake Deity, which for some stupid reason they actually made it so you can't do it if your king gets run over in battle. I mean, it doesn't really happen that often, but it would be really nice because then you could summon it off of damage equals reptile, ram it into your opponent's weakest monster, activate Rise of the Snake Deity, and then have out a deity of the poisonous snakes, which would be probably pretty weak, but it would still be a pretty nice little combo there. And I also think it would be pretty balanced just because if your king is actually getting run over in battle, you probably don't have a lot of reptiles in the graveyard, which means you probably won't be able to run over a lot of monsters your opponent controls anyway. And then for the last Venom monster, we have the Venom Cobra. I'm not really going to say a whole lot here. It's a 2000, but it was a pretty good turn 1 play back in the day where you could just set it and it would probably live the turn. Nowadays, you just summon Rescue Rabbit and use it for rank 4 play, but it was pretty good back in the day. So now on to the actual spell and trap cards that are actually relevant to the archetype itself, if you even want to call this an archetype. First off, we have the Snake Rain. Also, I just want to say I'm calling this right now. Snake Rain, sometime in the future, will be banned. I don't know when, I don't know how, but the moment we get a good reptile archetype, if it uses the graveyard, Snake Rain is going to get banned. It's going to get banned or it's going to get limited. I don't know which, but it is going to be on the ban list. I'm calling it right now. And the reason for this card being on the ban list would be pretty simple. One moment again. Sorry about that again. So back to what I was saying. So Snake Rain allows you to discard 1 card from your hand and then select 4 reptiles from your deck. Yes, 4. And send them all into the graveyard. So this is actually a pretty insane effect if it wasn't for the fact that there are only 3 reptile archetypes, none of which actually use the graveyard, and none of them are particularly useful in the graveyard. Like, here, I'll quickly go ahead and show you. There are like no reptiles that actually have decent graveyard effects. Like, out of all of these, I know that you don't do anything, you're banned, you don't do anything, you don't do, well, I mean, you summon yourself, but that's only if you die in battle. Like, let me see which one of these actually have a graveyard effect, and I know I'm just clicking through, but that's because I know what most of these cards do right off my head. Yeah, like, none of these do anything in the graveyard. Like, the best that you can really do here would be to pick a light reptile and a dark reptile, and then use it for a Chaos Summon. That would probably be the best thing that you could do in your standard deck. In a Venom deck based around the deity of poisonous snakes, however, you could use this to get up to 2,500 extra attack points, which is a pretty hefty boost for any monster to get, especially if it's unaffected by everything. But yeah, this card is just kinda meh right now, but I'm calling it. This thing will be on the ban list one of these days. We just gotta wait till Konami gives us a good reptile archetype. Next we have Venom Shot, which is basically a Foolish Burial plus a little bit of extra attack reduction. So first off, you get to send a reptile from your deck to the graveyard. And second, you get to place 2 Venom counters on a monster face up on the field. So basically you get to Foolish any reptile. Also, I'm just noticing this, but if we ever get a good reptile archetype, some of the Venom support is actually pretty decent for them. Anyway, so you get to foolish out a reptile. So say the reptiles get a Necro Guard now, you foolish that out. You get to weaken the monster by 1,000 attack points, and then you get to run over that monster with almost anything in your deck, ideally. So it's a pretty nice little card. I think you maybe would run 1 or 2 of it because Venoms don't really run a lot of monsters in most of their builds. Usually it's around 10 to 14 monsters. So you don't really want to just be dumping them continuously. Like, you maybe want to do this to get over a monster that's giving you issues at that particular point in time. I don't think you would actually want to use Venom Shot more than once a duel, maybe twice a duel if you're playing against something like Monarchs, where they just continuously summon really big, beefy beat sticks, and you really can't kill them very quickly. As Venoms, their Venom is not very strong. It normally takes you like 2 to 3 turns to be able to kill your generic 2,000 to 2,500 beat sticks, and even longer if they're 3,000. But I mean, it's an okay card. I wouldn't say it's particularly good, but it's not really bad either. Okay, next we have Viper's Rebirth. I know this isn't a Venom card, so to speak, but it is reptile support, and it is a pretty good one. It's effectively a monster reborn that doesn't negate your monster's effects, which means you could summon out, say, Venom Serpent or Venom Boa or something like that. It also justifies using Venom Shot because you can just revive the monster you send. And if you say you revive Venom Boa, you go ahead and hit your opponent for 1,000 reduction. You normal summon out like Venom Serpent, and then you run it over in battle, and then the end phase, the monster dies. But at that point, you've already basically gotten rid of something your opponent has. Although you could do something even more practical and summon out another Venom Serpent, use both of their effects, hit them for 1,000 reduction, then run over the monsters, deal some battle damage, and then exceed summon into a King and a Feral Imp to get a reptile from your deck to your hand, which is a little bit more practical if you ask me. So yeah, but it's a pretty good card. I just figured I'd throw it in here. I already went over Venom Swamp, so I'm not going to go over it again. This is also why Terraforming's here, because you have to run 3 of it. Like, you literally have to run 3 Venom Swamp and then 3 Terraforming, because you literally cannot play without Venom Swamp. So, Venom Burn. Venom Burn. This is actually a pretty peculiar card for Venoms to get, as I was under the impression that Venoms were meant to stun the opponent while they slowly destroyed everything that they have. But Venom Burn kind of insinuates that they want to just put a bunch of counters on the field and nuke the opponent for an OTK, FDK, or whatever you want to call it. The issue here is that, most monsters in the game have an attack stat, which means that if you want to actually use Venom Burn, you have to do something like an Ojama Trio, or you have to have a monster like Metal Reflex Slime, or anything that has 0 attack points and can reasonably survive while it gets those counters on them. Like, it's just a really weird card for Venoms to get. I mean, 700 burn for each counter is nothing to laugh at, as you can, under normal circumstances, deal at least 2,100 points of damage off of this card. But if you do that, then you're basically just healing off on all the poison that you've been slowly seeking into your opponent, and it's just a really awkward card. It doesn't go with any of the other support that the archetype has. Like, you want to kill your opponent's monsters, you want to kill them quickly, and you want to just control the board with a bunch of floodgates and stun cards. You don't really want to let your opponent's monsters live for like 10 turns or something to get the Venom Burn OTK to go. It's just not a practical card. Next we have Ambush Fangs, which is effectively a, what's a good card that ends the battle phase? I can't really think of any cards that end the battle phase right off my head outside of Electric Magnetic Turtle. But it basically will end the battle phase should one of your Venoms be attacked, which is a really good effect no matter how you look at it. And then it will place a Venom counter onto the monster that attacked. So this is a really good card. It needs to be run at 3 if you're running a Venom control deck, as your monsters are going to be attacked. That is not negotiable. And when they're attacked, you can activate Ambush Fang. That monster will lose 500 attack points. Then you go ahead, when they end their turn, Your Venom Swamp will go ahead and trigger, taking off another 500 along with everything on the field. And if your opponent was trying to OTK you through that, you could end up actually destroying their entire board before their next turn if you are lucky enough to have like a Venom Shot and you can tribute summon a Venom Boa. You can actually destroy an entire field off of that kind of a scenario. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but it could happen. Best case scenario, you at the very least kill one of their monsters, and then everything else will lose about 1,000 to 1,500 attack points, which is a pretty nice little thing to do. Oh, one moment. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of something in my throat. Anyway, so it's a pretty nice little card, Ambush Fang. I definitely would run 3 of it. And next, we're going to go off to probably the best card in the entire archetype if you want to go just by effect, and that is Snake Deity's Command. So this card is quite literally just a magic drain that negates the card your opponent activates at no real cost outside of having to have a Venom in your hand. So that's not really that hard to do. It's pretty easy to keep a Venom in your hand, especially if you should draw into a Venom Boa or something like that. Use this to negate something like a Twin Twister or a Regeki or a Soul Charge or a Pendulum Scale, a Field Spell. Like it's an endless possibility as to what you can actually negate with Snake Deity's Command. This card is absolutely insane. I think the only reason why it's not really... I gotta plug this in. I think the only reason why Snake Deity's Command isn't really talked about is because it belongs to the Venom archetype, which is notoriously famous for being unable to do much of anything on its own, so I think that's probably why it's not really talked about. But yeah, anytime you have a card that just says negate a spell card, it's pretty good, especially if it happens to be a counter trap. One moment, everybody, the dog's barking. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. The dogs were going crazy because someone came in. Next, we have the Alien Brain. I know this also isn't a Venom card, but it's pretty powerful, so let's just go over it real quick. If one of your Venoms should go and die in battle, which will happen a lot, you have to go ahead and activate Alien Brain and Snatch Steal it, and it becomes a reptile type. So I just figured I'd go ahead and review that, because your monsters die a lot. Next, we have Snake Whistle, another card that isn't Venom, but is pretty relevant because your monsters are always dying in battle. Venom dies in battle, you summon out another Venom from your deck. End of discussion. Offering to the Snake Deity, another card that isn't Venom related, but is pretty good, as you can tribute off one of your Venoms that's about to be run over in battle. Destroy 2 of your opponent's cards, and then they just kind of have to deal with it. Not really a lot they can do about it. Next we have Damage equals Reptile, which is basically here because your reptiles will be running over in battle. And if they do, you get to summon out your Venom Naga, the King of the Poisonous Snakes, which normally comes out at around 2,000, sometimes a little weaker, sometimes a little more. But it's a pretty nice little card. I don't really know what else to tell you about it. That's kind of all there really is to say about Venoms. They're a very slow archetype that revolves around a lot of stally cards while you try to collect a bunch of Venom counters on them and just try to slowly poison them to death. Sadly, they don't really do it very well, and normally they just end up losing a lot of their monsters just to kill like a basic Castell. Actually, I really probably shouldn't push Castell here because Castell is like this deck's bane of existence because they go ahead and spin your Venom Swamp to your deck, and you kind of don't have any way to get rid of it. Like, this thing is stronger than everything you have by nature. Except for maybe you, because you come out normally pretty big. And then we also have the Fusion Venom Monsters. I know they're not related to the archetype. I just thought it was pretty funny that Konami decided to give these things the Venom name, and they're like even the weakest of these cards, which would probably be Actually, now that I think about it, the weakest one out of this would probably be Supreme King Servant Dragon Starving Venom. And he's like 1,000,000,000 times better than anything in this archetype, or maybe the ability to negate any spell card. Anyway, this has been Alexis. Thank you, Low Tier for Life, for allowing me to upload this to your channel. And I'm signing out.